Last week was a busy one for the Vegas Golden Knights. The team's offseason moves were headlined by trading forward Nick Waugh for Toronto Maple Leafs star Mitch Marner, signing the wing to a lucrative 8-year contract. And sports reporter Nick Walters goes across enemy lines to hear the other side of the blockbuster deal.
Well, last Monday, the Vegas Golden Knights traded for star forward Mitch Marner, much to the elation of Golden Knights fans. But for those in Toronto, not so much. And to help break that down, we got Maple Leafs beat writer David Alter here. David, it's very well known the reaction in Toronto has been a little sour. Can you explain why?
This is a homegrown player who finished his Toronto Maple Leafs tenure as the 5th leading scorer of all time. It was a storybook when he was drafted 4th overall by the Leafs, playing it for his hometown team, that a lot of fans of the Maple Leafs, along with him and everybody else, had expectations that this was going to be one of the greatest Maple Leafs of all time, perhaps smashing records. And to kind of see it end this way is, you know, kind of an opportunity missed for a hometown player who loved this team and certainly very talented in terms of what he's been able to do. So a lot of Leaf fans, some of them pretty upset in terms of just kind of the way things kind of transpired here.
Well, David, 8 years, $96 million, now tied for the 5th highest paid player in the NHL in AAV. Do you think it's well-deserved for a guy with that talent that Mitch has?
Yeah, I think there's no question that the Golden Knights saw value in him, and he was probably going to command that kind of number. And you know what, if he would have went to maybe some of the other teams and tested the markets, there were projections that he could get a number exceeding that. Look, he's a 100-point player, very talented, eats up a lot of minutes, plays on the power play, penalty kill, and even strength. I mean, he's really the complete package in terms of the offensive type of player. There was never any doubt in terms of the money he was going to get. Really, it was going to be about fit and where he could win and where his lifestyle kind of fit, and all those things led to Vegas.
Well, there's been rumors linking Mitch Marner to the VGK for a long time. Even at last year's trade deadline, VGK GM Kelly McCrimmon admitted that there were talks with the Maple Leafs to do a 3-team deal. Can you kind of like detail back from what you can remember how we got to this point with all the murmurings that the Golden Knights were interested?
Yeah, and that's a lot of probably the Leaf fans' discontent here, because even when Mitch Marner kind of explained in his opening remarks to the Vegas media, you know, he kind of talked about the fact that he was kind of eyeing that kind of market and heard about some of the trade talks and some of that stuff where a lot of the pressure and everything in Toronto, when those talks or when those rumors started a year ago, it's like, okay, well, if you weren't really kind of buying into being in Toronto, then, you know, there could have been a way to kind of get something back, maybe address something else on the team. And so there was that question of commitment to the Toronto marketplace. And so, you know, the Leafs were stuck in a situation where Mitch Marner controlled everything. They gave him a full no move. The previous regime did. And it was fully within his rights to wait until the moment, which was the day before free agency, to kind of do a sign and trade and go to Vegas. So, you know, those talks about him being moved started maybe in 2023, just before his no move clause kicked in. But then things intensified with Vegas specifically right in and around March, around the trade deadline, when Vegas was looking to bolster their lineup. Toronto was looking for a package, and Marner himself kind of admitted that Vegas was a destination that he could see himself at.
Well, VGK fans are starting to figure out more about Mitch Marner, and everyone knows he's a very talented forward, one of the best wingers in the NHL. But the knock on him, it seems to be the postseason, that his regular season stats just weren't met in the postseason. How did you see that play out in the playoffs, and do you think it's a Marner issue or more of a Leafs issue?
I think it was maybe a little bit of both, but certainly when Mitch Marner was commanding what he was commanding from a salary standpoint, and the Leafs were kind of having this narrative of a core of 4 players, with Marner being one of them, there were expectations that he would step it up in that postseason. For whatever reason or another, it didn't happen. Specifically in games 5, 6, and 7 of a series where he's never scored a goal, which are very, very much the critical junctures of a playoff series. The Leafs have had struggles over the years. It's not solely on him, but in times where you expected offense, or you expected Mitch Marner to quote unquote do that magic, it just was never there. And so that's why he became a focal point or a lightning rod for Mitch Marner critics in Toronto in terms of, well, the Leafs aren't able to get the job done. And there were certain moments at those times where, you know, he would make a mistake, and fairly or unfairly, he would be a focal point of those mistakes in the postseason. So I think for those reasons, both the team and the player are moving on, and Vegas, which has an established recent history of playoff success, winning a cup in 2023, well, certainly there's going to be that expectation that Marner is that missing piece for why Vegas wasn't there last year, and then maybe at this point, or the last couple of years, and then at this point, it's going to be, okay, well, can they find a way for Marner to kind of persevere in those moments where the pressure isn't as much?
Yeah, we'll see if fitting in with Jack Eichel and the rest of the talented bunch that the Knights have could have Marner put the postseason woes in the past. But obviously, Toronto fans got to know Marner so well. 9 seasons with Toronto, but also dating back before then. As you said, he's an Ontario kid. He played with the London Knights. Now he's a Golden Knight. You got to cover him as well. Just explain to us, what do we need to know about Mitch Marner off the ice?
Yeah, I mean, Mitch Marner off the ice, he loves his family, he loves his dog Zeus, loves video game playing. Like, there's a lot of that stuff. I'm sure he's curbed a lot of that now that he's a dad. But those are some of the things that he is like off the ice. But talking to teammates of his, Mitch Marner, the person, is a very affable guy. Like, he's going to be very popular in that room. There's no doubt about that. I'm curious to kind of see just how he fits into the Vegas lifestyle, because, you know, as we know, it's not just about the Strip, it's about the suburbs and the areas and the communities that are built up. It's certainly growing. And I imagine now when you see a lot of these open practices that Vegas does, they certainly ingratiated themselves in the community, and that's probably going to be something that maybe Mitch Marner doesn't expect, where the demands on his time will be a lot. Like, I think there was a misconception there, because in Toronto, certainly there were demands on his time, but Vegas does a really good job of getting themselves involved in the community and having fans out there at practices. So I'm curious to see how Mitch kind of fits into that lifestyle, but certainly he's a friendly guy in terms of when you talk to him. I'm just curious to see how, when pressure starts to ratchet up a little, how he responds to that.
Awesome. Well, lastly for you, David, Marner did so much for the Leafs, you know, being tied for 5th in franchise history in scoring. And anytime a star player leaves an organization in team sports, the fans are going to like to see that. And there might be mixed feelings, especially for someone who grew up in Ontario and then now is a Vegas Golden Knight. What do you think the mindset of a Maple Leafs fan is? Obviously, if the Leafs are playing the Knights, they're not going to be Marner fans that night.
Yeah, I think the mindset would be a little bit different if Mitch Marner had a lot of success from a team standpoint here, and he was leaving without the Leafs getting much of a return. That's not to say Nick Waugh isn't a great player, but in terms of what they would have been able to leverage for a player just kind of walking away from free agency. But just given the recent success and how poorly the Leafs kind of finished off that playoff series and kind of some of the messaging, you know, there's a lot of upset Leaf fans about what transpired here. And so when Vegas comes to town for that first game with Marner in the Knights jersey in Toronto, there's going to be a lot of emotions. There's going to be a lot of booing. I would expect that. So it's tough. It's not something Toronto's used to, where you're seeing one of what should be one of the greatest Maple Leafs of all time choosing to walk away. It's not something the market's used to, and I'm sure some of the fans may react in tune when Vegas does get back to Toronto in the 25-26 season.
Well, it certainly adds a wrinkle to the future matchups when it comes to one of the most iconic franchises in the NHL with the Leafs against one of the newer franchises in the NHL with the Golden Knights. But certainly, us in Vegas, we'll be rooting on Mitch Marner, and Maple Leafs fans, maybe a few of them will as well. But David, we really appreciate your time. That's David Alter. You can find him on the Hockey News. He covers the Leafs for a living, and he does an awesome job. So, David, thanks so much for the time, my friend.
You got it. Thank you so much for having me on.
No problem. Well, Mitch Marner and those Golden Knights will work ahead towards September when they start training camp, and then, of course, the puck will drop for Season 9 in October. In the studio, I'm Nick Walters, Channel 13 Sports.